There they go. Test,
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
All right, it's on. We're good. Good evening. I'd like to call this October 7th meeting of the Northfield Township Planning Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, please call the roll, Mr. Stanilecho.
Mr. Dignan.
Present.
Mr. Iaquinto. Present. Ms. Chalkley.
Present.
Mr. Kuzno.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
And I'm here, Stanilecho.
And Ms. Chick will be here in about 10 minutes. Just got a note. Okay, we have the agenda before you. If there are any no corrections, we will adopt it.
I would like another item added for a discussion on the presentation from the last meeting by our planner.
Under policy review and discussion?
Wherever you feel
You
appropriate, ma'am.
You can bring that up down there. Okay. Any other items anyone wants to discuss?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Dignan and support by
Support.
Mr. Iaquinto. Do we have any more discussion on the agenda? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Now we have the opportunity for call to the public. If anyone would like to speak to us about anything, feel free to come on up. You have 3 minutes. Please address yourself to me, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left and when time is up. Welcome.
Can I buy 30 seconds? My name's Kris Olsson. I live at 450 West Joy Road.
Oh, turn on your microphone, sir.
Because we don't seem to read. Is it on? No. It says on. Hello?
Right.
Is that over there?
It should be. That's on. It's turned all the way here. Oh. Should that light be on?
Yeah. Hello. Noah, this is God. Can I start over now?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
starting you over.
My name's Craig Warburton. I live at 450 West Joy Road. And in typical fashion, I'm going to try and not become emotional and overly passionate and just grumble. I wrote a document, and since we no longer read correspondence or conclude them in the meetings at all, I'm going to read it to you. I saw the termination of the Carlisle-Wortman relationship with the township as a profound loss, especially because I know they're one of the preeminent planners in Michigan. After listening to Ms. Dumichel's presentation on the citizen survey, I must admit I'm incredibly glad at the change. Ms. Dumichel's analysis of the particular needs of our township to gather public opinion were spot on. The instant rebuttal-like response from several commissioners was completely out of line. Their open insistence that this analysis could not have been completed without township staff or commission and input was inappropriate. Ms. Dumichel's analysis is naively unbiased and profoundly complete. Her take on the 3 priorities from the previous 1996 and 2010 surveys cast dispersions on just where the current penchant for change is emanating. Her input on the survey is invaluable and must be heeded as the professional advisor we're paying her to be. Her work already appears exemplary. Not only does she recommend a survey is unnecessary given the consistency of prior results, she prompts a question as to where the suggestion of density changes comes from. It does not appear to come from the township citizenry. It appears to come from township leadership alone, whose motivations must be examined, especially in light of the dramatic attempts to change the collection of minutes and changes in the bylaws. The bylaws are complete and should only be changed as indicated in the approved bylaws. I brought my copy of Robert's Rules of Order. I don't see one on the desk, and you're about to discuss bylaws. I don't think that works, but mine's over 1,000 pages.
No comments, Mr. Dignan, please.
The bylaws are complete and should only be, perhaps before any wholesale changes are effected, the commission should attempt to live true to those bylaws. The recent efforts to change them are questionable. Her inclusion of several different sources for definition of minutes is highly insightful and honestly in direct conflict with the direction touted by some on the commission today. The minutes of meetings have been very complete for a very long time, up to the recent attempts by the secretary to reduce that content to the minimum required. Our standards have always been higher than that, and they should remain so. There is in the packet a more incredibly biased and unprofessional work by Cobalt Community Research. I won't belabor the point-by-point examination except to point out that it's only about change, suggests impossible scenarios, and asks for demographics that can only play out to be manipulated and discriminatory. I got 20 seconds. I must also ask why the township has already begun dispersing the $17,000 to them based on time passage and not based on task completion. This is a complete and utter waste of taxpayer money. I ask that the commissioners continue the diligent work of refining and enforcing our brilliant master plan as it is written. Please tell Biltmore they can build all the homes they wish within the confines of the master plan. Clearly on 5-acre lots, the accommodations for clusterings and the like make the taxable value of the homes twice what it would be with their tract housing. I availed myself of the HRWC volunteers to survey our property. I thank them for that service to our environment and to the very special ecosystem they endeavor to protect. I urge the Planning Commission to concentrate on incorporating their recommendations brought to this body in our master plan before continuing to work to defile it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak with us tonight?
Hi, David Gordon, 5558 Helmer Road. Madam Chair, I was wondering if we could pass out this from the 2010 survey before my clock starts.
Sure, go ahead. Leave one here for Janet.
Thank you. What I've distributed to the Planning Commission and staff is taken directly from the 2010 survey. I had nothing to do with the 2010 survey. It was actually done by a group of people, many of whom are still serving today. Janet Chick, in the acknowledgments of the 2010 survey, Janet Chick, our supervisor Engstrom, Jackie Otto, Marlene Chockley, Tracy Thomas, Sam Iaquinto, Larry Romans, Mark Stanilecho, all these people are listed here under acknowledgments for the 2010 survey. This was done to answer some questions, and I think what's really interesting is looking at the 2 pages that I passed out, the most important issue to the residents of this community. The question is asked, number 24 in the survey, how important each of the following to the Northfield Township government should they be, these issues? Natural features preservation, redeveloping vacant land, encouraging new commercial development, encouraging new development in the Whitmore Lake area and downtown, preserving agricultural use of land, and improving downtown Whitmore Lake are all the top 5, 6 items. Reducing the current 5-acre zoning is number 17. Providing more housing is number 19 out of 20. This is not something the community thinks is important based on your own survey less than 5 years ago. The second page is also from the survey in 2010. It's called the three worst features of Northfield Township, things that people really don't like, and obviously a high tax, lack of commercial, inadequate roads. Everybody knows that. Improving downtown. But a lack of affordable homes, again, is ranking number 19. Limited housing options is ranked number 20. It doesn't make the top 10. It doesn't make the top 15. Point being, it's no surprise that our planner, who didn't have any bias when she came in here, looked at the 1996 survey and the 2010 survey and said, I don't really see why we're trying to redo a master plan for residential housing, because the residents don't care about it. It's not important to them. What they'd like to do is preserve natural features, redevelop vacant land for commercial growth, and improve Whitmore Lake. I would hope that the Planning Commission would redirect their efforts in that direction. What you can do about helping to preserve natural features in our community. What's being done about that? Improving the appearance of downtown Whitmore Lake. What's being done about that? I don't think you can do much about taxes, but there's other things that you can work on, and I hope you will, because we have a good planner now, another planner, a fresh set of eyes. Perhaps you could ask her how to approach these issues. Doing another survey is a waste of taxpayer dollars and a waste of time, which is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak?
Good evening. My name is David Perry. I live at 9411 Earhart Road. Think globally, act locally. Words of John Lennon. Those are words worth keeping in mind as we discuss the future of our township. To build a subdivision with hundreds of homes, or to keep it an open space. But the land in question is not open land. It's prime farmland. Prime farmland is an ever-shrinking essential resource in our township, our state, our country, and indeed the world. Most land in the world is too rocky, too dry, too hilly, too wet, or too cold, or topped with soil too poor to support agriculture. Northfield Township has been blessed with an increasingly rare commodity, this prime farmland, with fertile soil, abundant rain, and a long growing season. Plant a seed here, and it grows. But in this country, blessed with seemingly endless farmland is shrinking. Midwest wheat and cornfields are routinely paved for roads, subdivisions, and businesses. Orange groves are bulldozed in Florida for condos. Urban sprawl eats up California's vegetable farms. At the local level, it may not look like a problem, but the national statistics are staggering. We lose about just under 1 acre of land, farmland here in this country per minute, which means if this meeting lasts 2 hours, we'll have lost 100 acres. In this age of homeland security, we must also be concerned about food security. Don't be just planners, be visionaries, like the people in 1844 who envisioned Central Park in Manhattan. Think about that today and what that means to the community of New York. This juice I have here, brought locally. There's concentrate in this bottle from 10 countries on 4 continents. Let's think locally. We can grow this in our backyard. I do. 50 years from now, fuel for distant food transport is cost prohibitive. Imagine a southeast Michigan with a sea of houses, businesses, and industries with a much larger population to feed. Envision an oasis within it, Northfield Township, with abundant prime farmland. Envision land previously cropped with grain, but now intensively cultivated, producing vegetables, fruit, nuts, and for local consumption. Envision fruit-filled orchard used for outdoor recreation in the fall. Envision hoop houses and greenhouses that extend the growing season far into the cold months. Envision companies in township areas zoned for industry using crops produced from our prime farmland in their products. Envision downtown Whitmore Lake as a destination, lined with restaurants, filled with diners eating local foods, watching sunsets over the lake from outdoor patios and wide windows. Envision retail businesses those diners shop in before or after they eat. Envision an industry that creates jobs and income for many, and food, a basic need for all. In short, envision preserving our prime farmland and forests as an opportunity for development without destruction. Exactly what we, the residents of this township, have clearly cited as our top priorities in the last 2 surveys. Open space, recreation, downtown development, and this is carefully manifested in our master plan. What we don't want is a subdivision with with hundreds of homes. We've clearly indicated that for the past 20 years. We don't need to do it again. To paraphrase that famous line from the movie Treasure of the Sierra Madre, we don't need no stinking surveys. Think globally, act locally, be visionaries, dismiss the call for a new survey, tell Biltmore to go back home. Let's us who call Northfield Township home go back to our wonderful master plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Mulcrone, 366 Glenmore Drive. Came to my attention that there's a version 4 of the survey from the survey provider in Lansing, name escapes me right now, that I had a chance to look at, and I wanted to comment on that briefly because it's not on the agenda, but I said that I would give my professional opinion about surveys, and I can tie it together with some of the comments that have already been made. Version 4 of the survey has a map in it, a couple maps in it, and it's very complex. I think keeping the survey simple is probably the thing to do, and yet this next version of it is more complex than the previous versions. The questions are still not unbiased, and they still don't get at about the strength of belief in the existing master plan, which I think is at the heart of the issues that we are discussing here. We have a master plan, it's not that old. I think the people in the township and the leadership of the township need to know what people think of that master plan and how strongly they hold those opinions. And that question is nowhere in the next version of the questionnaire. So there's a couple of things. The map, also the fact that the map's complex and asks people to tell them where they live. If you're going to mail these surveys out, adding a color map adds to printing costs, and the fact that you can code surveys, you don't need to ask people where they live because you can tell where they live by the mail code. So the surveys are coded or numbered. The respondents can still remain anonymous, but you can still tell which quadrant or which portion of the township they live in if you do the surveys right. And this survey company should know that, and they're not, and it's going to add to the cost. There's also an open end in there. I don't know if there's coding built in, how they're going to handle that. You need to ask them that question. Or I'll ask them if they ever come to a meeting, because I certainly would like to hear what their vision is or what direction they're coming from with the survey. As far as some of the other comments, I'd like to second some of these comments regarding the recent analysis done by Ms. Dumichel. I found it to be thorough and professional, where I find version 4 and the previous versions of what you've gotten from the survey provider to be not very professional and not very thorough. I don't think my graduate studies tell me that strongly held attitudes that people have don't change very often. So if you have a survey from 1996 and you have a survey from 2010 with basically the same results, you're probably not going to get different results with doing a survey in 2015. So I think you ought to think about that as well as you move forward with this. I know you've already had 4 versions of a questionnaire and paid half the money to this survey company, but I'm not sure that you still need a survey. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Thank you all for coming up and coming here tonight. We'll move on to the next item in the agenda.
Before we move on, if I'm going to ask Mr. Fink, a number of us still can't get connected on the Wi-Fi, sir.
Sir, I can't do anything about it right now. I don't know why. I've reset the router and I've reset the cable modem.
Okay.
My iPad is seeing the router. It was the password that wasn't working.
Yeah, but mine as well, but when we enter the password, so the router's not accepting it.
Must have been changed somehow.
I would like
Does
a copy.
anyone need a copy? Yeah. Well, I can go on and mention some of the correspondence that we've received recently as the next item. Do you need it in front of you? Probably not. Mr. Burns sent out...
Madam Chair?
Yes?
That item is a privileged document that you're about to
Privilege?
discuss. It was sent over under attorney-client privilege and is tagged so on the top. It cannot be discussed unless attorney-client privilege is waived.
But they send everything like this.
I'm telling you right now, that is under attorney-client privilege. Until that attorney-client privilege is waived, it cannot be discussed unless we choose to waive it.
They said,
It's
I know,
privileged communication.
it is. They put that header on every single document they send out.
Right.
This was never intended to be attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
Right. It was a question that
Just
we
didn't,
asked.
I just didn't want to set an example that anything sent over.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it's a good point, because you usually want to have some due diligence on that.
I mean, I can make a motion.
It's not intended as attorney-client.
Okay, I can make a motion to waive attorney-client privilege on the document that was
Support.
forwarded to us from our attorney.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Dignan and support by Ms. Chick to waive the attorney-client privilege on the communication we had from Paul Burns about the bylaws. So did everyone get a chance to read this? They got it by email. Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Do we
there's a
have to vote?
motion on the
Do we
floor.
have to vote? Oh, motion, I'm sorry. Okay, so all in favor of waiving the attorney-client privilege, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So this was just a question that we had asked of them before we changed our bylaws, and this is their answer. So I just wanted to bring that up, that we got that. It was not in our packet, we just got it yesterday. Basically, we need to follow our bylaws. That was what it says.
I am disappointed in this document. It did not address the one thing that I had stated at the last meeting, and that is, it says that you have to. The thing is there's nothing in the law to enforce that. Nothing. You don't have, I mean, it says you have to.
Okay.
If you don't, there's nothing that can be done, and that's the problem that I have with it.
Okay.
And I mean, that's, you know, I guess it's a question for Paul Burns is, you know, you say you must, okay? You can't be charged, you can't be penalized, you can't be, I mean, I guess the township board could take and vote to remove an individual that's on an appointed board, but there's no teeth in the law about that at all.
Okay. Is that all, Mr. Dignan?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, Ms. Chick.
So I guess I'm not understanding, even though there's no teeth, you say there's no consequences, why would we not want to follow proper procedures as we establish them?
You absolutely would.
Ms. Chick, if anyone else would like to speak, are you finished, Ms. Chick? Did anyone else want to comment before Mr. Dignan gets a second chance?
It was attorney-client
is.
privilege until we released it. A letter.
Was it voted on to be released?
It was.
We don't engage with the general public.
No.
It's our job.
Yeah, but we can't discuss with you at this point, but I'll give it to you as soon as we're done. So anyway, does anyone else have any comment about this document? Okay. I would say that we would want to follow, my opinion, we want to follow our bylaws. We set those rules as a group to manage our meetings and our communication with each other. We should be following them so that we all know what the rules are. There are pieces in here, in our bylaws, that involve conflict of interest, you know, voting. Why would we not want to follow our own rules? So there's no teeth. Okay, Mr. Dignan.
I would agree with you. The County Board of Commissioners, shortly after you left sitting on that County Board of Commissioners, went into this issue in depth. because they realized that they truly did not have policies that could govern them in a way if they were to have a rogue member. Now, those are elected officials, so it's a little bit different there, because truly there's nothing that can be done other than recall an elected official. Appointed, it's a little different, but it's just something that each of us needs to be cognizant of to make sure that we are doing what we can do best to abide by them.
Yeah. Oh, this isn't the bylaw. This is just the.
But it is an item of concern,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we asked for this. It's just unfortunate that there was nothing addressed there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple other items. You've received a letter from Miss Cecilia Infante, and so that's in your packet. We received also a letter from Cobalt, and this was included to the Board of Trustees because I requested information from them based on what this board had asked me to ask them on how they might best deal with preparing a survey. So that's where the letter came from that you see that includes how they deal with actually doing surveys in other communities, their ideal way. And then the other document we received from Cobalt was which it says draft 4, and this is based on just the couple questions that the Planning Commission was interested in hearing about if we were to go ahead with a survey. And so basically there's like 6 questions. This is obviously not a complete survey. They put this together because the Board of Trustees requested something from them. And it is by no means anything close to final, but it did bring up the 2 questions, or the few questions that we had requested that they put down. So that's where it is right now. This whole survey is tabled indefinitely, or set aside indefinitely, so we are not dealing with it at this current time. Mr. Stanilecho.
Was there any clarification from the Township Board on who is going to be handling this from here on out, survey questions?
When we discussed it at the workshop meeting, at board member comments, it was, we had, my discussion with them was that we were going to go back to beginning of the way Cobalt wanted to do it, and kind of scrap everything that we've done so far and let Cobalt manage the survey. They are certainly interested in the input that we've gotten to them, and they're going to do what they can with it. And I also asked the board members if they had some kind of direction or some kind of comments or 3 things that they wanted on there, that they should please send that to the Planning Commission. I don't know if we've gotten anything or not, but yeah, we're kind of starting from phase 1 with Cobalt again.
All right, well, if we're going to, my opinion is if we're going to do this, if we're going to start from phase 1, it needs to be either at the Township Board or at the Planning Commission, and not at both.
Right. They want it at the Planning Commission.
All right, because it's too confusing, I'm going to say, because if they want to do it, I have no problems with that. But if they want us to do it, then I believe that it should be done at this body, and this is where it should stay.
Right.
Otherwise, we're sort of wasting, everybody's time. It's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And so it is set aside right now for indefinitely till Mr. Stanilecho and I determine it's ready to come back on the agenda. So it is not close. I would like to mention that I had been talking with individuals, and I went to the DDA, I went to the Parks and Rec Commission, I met with some of the Northfield neighbors. I intend to meet with the seniors and anyone else from the groups that come in and they're interested in development to talk about the survey. But again, it may not go anywhere if it's all indefinitely set aside. So anyway, but I'm getting a better understanding of really what the issue is. And it's not necessarily just, do we build houses? We have a downtown that's dying, and why is it dying? And our house is going to save it. You know, so there are more questions. As I meet with people, there are more questions coming up than just, do we build houses? So it's been very educational for me. I appreciate people who have given me input, and I'll put together a report at some point for this body. Okay. Okay. And then the other item that we did receive as correspondence was master planning for resilient waterfront communities from the Michigan Association of Planning. And this particular planning, 3 hours of a program, will be November 4th at the Etzel and Eleanor Ford House in Grosse Pointe Shores. And it looks very interesting to me, since we do have a waterfront community. Even though we don't have a public beach, we still have water, and we still have businesses down there that could potentially capitalize on the fact that it's right next to the water, and there are some public opportunities on the water. So anyway, this is November 4th. I am bringing this up because I would like to go to it. It is one of our Planning Commission meetings. If anyone else would like to go to it, or if we have no applicants and we can cancel our meeting, I guess I would recommend anybody who wants to go to it, please do. But we don't have to register now for a couple more weeks, so we have time to think about it. And if you haven't received this, I will send it by email, because I did download it from the MAP site, so I'll do that. Okay, that's the end of correspondence as far as I have. Does anyone else have any correspondence? No? Okay. We'll move on to reports. Ms. Chick, do you have a Board of Trustee report?
The Board of Trustees met for their on September 22nd. They voted on a couple of event applications. There was a discussion. Brian Rubel was in attendance regarding the wastewater treatment plant equalization tank, and his opinion was that we should move forward with that. And basically that's it.
Thank you. Do we have something from the ZBA, Mr. Dignan?
Yes, the ZBA did meet. There was a variance that was granted to an individual in the agricultural area for an accessory building on a side yard setback. It was a modest variance, but it had been part of a building plan when they built the building, and since they had built it and plotted it, they'd already, and when they built, they poured all their walkways and planned it appropriately and put their drain field in the right place. The ordinance changed between the time that they did that and the time that they were actually able to afford to build the building. So, it was a modest adjustment, and it was supported also by his neighbors that would be affected if it were to affect their land. So.
Okay. Thank you. Staff report. Do we have anything, Ms. Bird? No, nothing? Okay. Planning consultant report, Ms. DeMichelle.
No report.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll move on to the old business, Huron River Watershed Council presentation. We have Ms. Olsson here tonight to discuss that with us. So,
good evening.
Welcome. Make sure you keep
Is this working? Good. Well, thanks for having me again. When I was here last, I had presented the green infrastructure planning map, and I see you have it up there, so that's great. And then the next step in the process was to have the Watershed Council review your master plan and zoning ordinance against these recommended elements that we have created, both for master planning and for zoning ordinances. After working with townships over the last, this is our 50th anniversary this year, we have some expertise in terms of how local communities can protect water quality, and then using a lot of information from Center for Watershed Protection, Michigan Association of Planning, local government commission, SEMCOG, and other organizations have put together various guidebooks for what local communities can do to protect water quality and allow development. So looking at all that information, we created that elements checklist that I think you all received in your packet. And then I read the master plan and the zoning ordinance and compared that to what the recommended elements that we'd like to see in those documents. And so Marlene and I talked this afternoon before the meeting here, and I think what I'll do is talk about the master plan elements first, and in more of a general sense, given that you're not undergoing the revision process yet for the master plan, but this is something that you can have so that when you're ready to look at your master plan in more detail and think about what kinds of provisions you'd like to have in your master plan to protect green infrastructure, do recreation planning, protect water quality, those kinds of things. You have this. So I'll just go over it briefly, the elements that we recommend and what your master plan briefly says, and then if it's all right with you, I'll move into the zoning part of it. So are there any questions about that? Great. So I think you all have this recommended elements for master plans, and it kind of goes in generally the way that master plans go. They start with general background information and they move on to general goals and objectives and then to policies and that sort of thing. So it kind of tries to follow that format. So one of the things we like to recommend for a master plan is to talk about natural areas and green infrastructure, which I've been talking with you about over the summer. And so including language about green infrastructure and natural corridors. And your master plan does do that. It doesn't specifically mention the term, I think just because it's a new piece of jargon now, green infrastructure, but it talks about that. I'm going to take my glasses off because I need to have them off to be able to read this, so if you don't mind, I can still see you. So you do have that, so that's great. Another recommended item is that natural features, so the waterways, wetlands, woodlands, all of those things that make up green infrastructure, having them listed and mapped, and that is in the master plan, but it could be enhanced. It doesn't mention specifically steep slopes or groundwater. And then I had included materials of sample language from other master plans, mostly from Ann Arbor Township since I'm a planning commissioner there. And so I know a lot about that master plan, but that's something you could think about when it's time to revise the master plan is looking at the kinds of natural features other master plans have in there and just enhancing what you already have. We've been working with townships on adding another provision in the master plan that addresses impervious surface. We talked a lot about that during the workshop, the idea that impervious surface, hard surfaces, pavement, rooftops, the amount of impervious surface in a watershed can determine the quality of the water in the river or the stream. And so a master plan that addresses that issue will be helpful as you move forward as development occurs in your community. And you don't have language that addresses that. And again, as you move forward with the revision process, Ann Arbor Township has gone through a process where they've looked at current impervious surface in their township in different creek sheds within the township. Of course, in Northfield Township, you mostly have the Horseshoe Creek watershed. And looking at current impervious and then what the future impervious could be given what the master plan allows to be built. And then having language kind of addressing that and saying, given what the impervious surface is now and what it might be, what are the kinds of things the township can look forward to in terms of preserving natural areas, keeping impervious surface down for development. So that's something that we can work with you on adding to your master plan when the time comes. And then having language about the current condition of agriculture, you do have that in your master plan. And you also have a non-motorized transportation plan, which is recommended. And you have many statements in there talking about generally land use patterns. So the idea that promoting land use patterns that provide compact development, so not consuming a lot of land sort of per household or per person, and then preserving natural areas, preserving a natural land use pattern in the areas where you're not promoting development. So you have a lot of language in the master plan that talks about that. So that's a positive thing from our perspective. Now we get into the second page, which is more about not stating the conditions, but more about what are the goals or visions generally for the township. And so having a statement supporting agricultural preservation, that's something that we would recommend, and that's something that the master plan does have. And having a statement supporting natural features preservation, so preserving and keeping those natural features that are providing those ecological services that I've talked about, clean water, clean air, all those things. You do have statements in support of natural features. Again, we can work with you to enhance that language using other township master plan language. Statement of support for open space and natural areas. Again, you do have language that supports that in your goals and policies, so that's terrific. Statement of support for watershed conditions, so not just the woodlands in general, but talking about watersheds. And of course, as a watershed council, that's something we can help you with. You want to enhance your master plan for that. And then I looked at your master plan relative to what are called smart growth principles, if people heard that term, read about smart growth. And it's another one of those jargony terms that's been popular and was popular back in the 90s when we were having so much growth and so much spread out development, and so people were trying to come up with a way to promote this kind of pattern of land use and called it, of course, smart growth, because that's what these people wanted to see. So they came up with the 10 elements of smart growth, and you can see them there. Mixing your land uses, taking advantage of compact building design, like I said, creating a range of housing opportunities so you have diversity in your housing, walkable neighborhoods, so the less you have to rely on your automobile, the less impervious surface you have to provide, the better your water quality is. Having attractive communities with a strong sense of place, and you've already talked about your downtown area, and so having an attractive downtown area is important. And then on the other side of that, preserving the open space and farmland so that you can protect your green infrastructure. And then strengthen and direct development toward the existing communities. You already have infrastructure, you already have a sewer area, you already have water. That's where you want to have your development. Providing a variety of transportation choices, not just for automobiles, but also for mass transit, bicycles. I see you have the Barker Road bicycle path you worked on, those kinds of things. So these are the 10. I won't go into, I almost went into all of them, but the master plan actually mentions all of them, which is actually pretty rare for at least our area. Most township master plans in more rural areas haven't really thought about that, so I thought that was important. And then the master plan moves into, what are the actual policies that the township wants to have to see those goals come forth, and so natural features policies, again. There are policies in the master plan that talk about protecting natural features, so that's great. But again, we have some information. We have looked at other township master plans, not just Ann Arbor Township, but that's what I provided to you as an example, where there are more policies that you could enhance your master plan with. Stream corridor policies in specific. You have policies to protect stream buffers, buffers along streams, so having a natural vegetation buffer between, like, say, a lawn and the stream. That is probably the most important and in some ways easiest ways to get right away benefits of water quality protection. It's just having 25, 50 foot would be better. Vegetated buffer where you don't mow and you allow natural vegetation along stream sides. The best way the first thing you should be doing in protecting water quality. And you do talk about that in your master plan. Open space natural areas policies. It's getting kind of like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but these would be the actual policies that you're talking about. And you do have policies in there. And again, we could also help and enhance that language as you get into your master plan revision process. Watershed policy, so having policies where you're preserving your green infrastructure and your natural areas on a watershed basis. So again, we have some sample master plan that we can show you, some sample master plan language. Urban services district, so I kind of brushed on that a little bit, having your area where you already have urban services, water and sewer, mass transit, those kinds of things, lots of pavement, commercial areas. Having a district or a boundary around those areas where you're saying, well, we're not going to be leapfrogging out our services because that's very inefficient, and we're going to be concentrating our urban services in a particular area, and the township does have that in their master plan. And then stormwater policy, so what to do when you do have runoff. You do have policies for that in your master plan, but again, we can also help enhance that language. There's always room for improvement. Agriculture preservation policies, including policies, yes, there are statements in support of agricultural preservation, so that's great. Purchase and transfer of development rights, I think probably you're familiar with purchase of development rights, so if you want to continue farming, you could actually purchase a conservation easement or the development rights from a farmer. They can continue farming on that land and own the land and sell the land, but the rights to develop are forever taken, they've been purchased, so that land has to remain undeveloped. So lots of townships in your area actually have millages where they, the community has taxed themselves and created a millage so that the township has a fund where they can go and purchase development rights from local farmers. So Ann Arbor City has a greenbelt, as you probably know, a commission that does this. Ann Arbor Township has a fund, Scioto Township does. Webster Township has a PDR ordinance, and they have funded that as well. So lots of communities in the area have done that. Transfer of development rights is a little bit different. It's like purchase of development rights, but instead of purchasing the development rights, well, you sort of purchase the development rights from that rural area and transfer those development rights so that you increase the density in another area of the township. This could be a very interesting thing for the township to pursue, since you do have an area where you're wanting to encourage development, and you have your outlying areas where you have a more rural land use pattern. So this is something that we would love to pursue. It's not very, it's somewhat rare in Michigan, so it would be visionary to do this.
I've got a couple pages that I copied from Spring Lake Township.
Yeah.
Can I just pass those? I'll just pass those along to my fellow commissioners, just so they have it when they go home if they want to think about this afterward. It looks like it's all privately done, and there's no government money associated with that.
It can be done that way. Probably that's the way it's being done in Michigan. It's in Pennsylvania. They actually New Jersey and Pennsylvania have extensive TDR programs, and they have township government as well, and those are run by the government. But yes, it can also be done just strictly through private methods.
Okay.
And then, so what Marlene passed out is this is just a piece from the Spring Lake master plan, and so they're also talking about, they've just put this in their master plan that they would like to work on this. I don't believe they have a program yet, but it talks about it in this last paragraph, and you can see the little picture. It has a receiving zone and a sending zone, so you're receiving density in one area of the township from another.
Madam Supervisor, or Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Fink.
Questions for Kris, if I may.
Please.
So there's a different value structure, financial value structure of land based on the geography of Northfield Township. So how in a TDR program do you deal with land that's valued differently based on where it's located?
It's pretty much the way you would figure it out if you're doing a PDR, a purchase of development rights. So you have, and then, again, I haven't actually ever done one with a township, so I don't know all the details, but we did a study some years ago where we did some comparison of if this land was developed using TDR, what would be the impacts versus if it was just developed the way the current zoning is. But as far as I understand it, it's an assessor, you have an assessment done of, say, the sending zone property, and then you come up with the amount it would take to purchase those development rights. And then in the receiving zone, I'm not exactly sure how that works, but you come up with a way to...
Right, but my point is that let's take this in a simplistic way. Let's look at this in a simplistic format. If you have a receiving zone and a sending zone, okay, because I am familiar with TDRs, and I think TDRs work when the land values are even between the two zones. When the desire of the desire of both of the lands in the receiving zone and the sending zone have equal value, but when one has greater value, perceived financial value than the other, you're hard pressed to get someone to buy in the sending and to develop in the receiving if the value proposition from a development standpoint is the other way around.
Right.
The thing about, the thing about.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want
Yes.
to take the micro? Oh, you have your microphone.
Sure. So I would think, and then, like I'm just like thinking as you're talking here, but I would think that you would work that out when you set up the program. So if you would understand what the potential value is of the sending zone, and then you would figure out what the density would have to be in the receiving zone to make that a reasonable proposition. Does that sound accurate?
I don't think, yes, and I've thought a great deal about this for Northfield Township, and I don't think that I don't think that it's a tool that will work in Northfield Township based on the market demographics of Northfield Township.
Okay.
Well, it's something you can keep in your toolbox, and if it ever becomes viable.
Right.
But you know, if you ever decide to look further into it.
From a preservation standpoint, I think in Northfield Township it would work from a preservation standpoint, and I don't know that TDRs would work from that perspective.
Right. Well, we're talking with Webster about trying to do something with TDR.
Right. You have 4 different school districts.
Yeah.
And the value of land and its relationship to financial value is also related to the school district.
Sure.
So that kind of plays into your TDR model. So if your receiving zone and your sending zone are in completely different school districts, then you have a completely different value structure. It's just completely different.
Right. Well,
on the record, could we sit at a microphone and have everyone hear exactly what you're saying? I'm sorry, Howard, but it's really hard to
excuse me.
You're not.
Well,
You're a major participant at this point.
right. We'll make sure in.
School board line.
Okay.
well, the devil's always in the details, so it's something that the township can keep in your toolbox. Like I said, you could even mention it in the master plan as something that you want to look into. You don't have to do it. I think it's something that's going to be more prevalent in the state, and as more communities start doing it, it might become more clear how to do it. Some of the developers that come in have done it before, and so you know, it also depends. Maybe in the downtown area, those are not people who have kids, and maybe there's development. They're looking for something else. They're not necessarily looking for this at the school district, but you know, you'd have to just wait. You have to see and do those studies at the time you're ready to move forward with, if you decide to. So
I wouldn't want to write it off before we've studied it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, these are all really, these elements are written for everyone, and it's just up to the township to decide which ones to pursue. So,
right.
And then just the last one, which is a difficult one, but it's something that's on the recommended list, is having truly rural zoning outside of the urban areas. And in the master plan, I believe the lot sizes envision 5-acre lot sizes. So that's really not agricultural level density. It's not rural enough to maintain agriculture, if that's really what you want to do. I understand the difficulty in Michigan with any kind of downzoning or reducing density once you have that. So I'm not recommending personally anything, but that's just something that you want to keep in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions about the master plan recommendations?
Can you repeat or expound upon what you just said at the very end there? I didn't quite understand that.
So if you have allowable 5-acre lot density type zone, right now it's 10-acre lot zoning, I understand, right, in the ag area? Or is
Well,
it
no,
5?
in the recreation conservation, we have 10-acre. I don't think that's been changed.
Right.
But we have 5-acre in the ag areas.
So just on the face of it, if you envision your township being built out to 5-acre lot density kind of development in those rural areas, that will not truly preserve agricultural
Right, it consumes more land,
use.
correct?
Right. And once you have those sort of large lot developments, people start complaining about the farming and the smells, and it's more difficult. It fragments the farmland. So it would be better to have allowable larger lot, like in Freedom Township. I think it's 10, which is still not really, according to professional planners, it's not really enough to preserve agriculture on its own. I mean, you have other tools, like Howard's saying, you have other tools for preservation, but just as a matter of record, that will make it difficult to preserve agriculture, having that level of density. I understand the difficulty that it would cause to try and downzone. It's very difficult in our home rule state. But it's something that I mentioned because it's something that professional planners mention. So,
Okay. Thank you.
So moving on to the zoning ordinance elements. So I read through the zoning ordinance and looked at generally what we recommend that a typical zoning ordinance would have to protect water quality. So I'll just go through the elements. And again, it starts more of a general look, talking about land use patterns, and then goes more specific. And
Hang on. Go ahead.
That's all right. So the first thing that we look at is, does the zoning ordinance have policies that encourage infill? So infill development just refers to development that's happening within an already urban area, say on vacant lots, or it reuses already developed land. So you can see from a water quality standpoint, that would be much better than using up more rural land. The land is already impervious, it's already developed, you already have services. So that's something that we would encourage. So the township does encourage mixed-use development in the Whitmore Lake District, so we are happy about that. So encouraging mixed-use development and livable neighborhood design helps preserve green infrastructure landscapes and maintain water quality. So as far as I'm concerned, you're on the leading edge of that in terms of your township zoning ordinance compared with other township zoning ordinances. So that's great. Another policy is limiting development to where the infrastructure exists, and I've already kind of gone over this, but you do limit urban development to your sewer service area in your zoning ordinance, so we would support that. Again, mixed-use transit, so it's getting back to some of those smart growth principles that I was talking about. The township does encourage transit-oriented development in the Whitmore Lake districts. We'd always want to see more transit-oriented development anywhere you can get it within the downtown area, within the sewer service area. A CIP for urban areas, that's something that we recommend, having a capital improvement program. I know you have a DDA and you have probably been working on that sort of thing. So I don't know if you've thought about doing a capital improvement plan.
We as a planning commission did one, but then the Board of Trustees decided that they wanted to handle it from then on, so they've been doing that.
So I probably just didn't see it in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we haven't done it, but it would be of interest, I would think, to the Board of Trustees.
We did a
some of these
CIP
things.
2 years ago.
Great. Okay, good. That's just that
The planning commission.
Good.
Right.
So that's great. And so another recommendation would be development standards that are tailored to infill areas to remove hurdles, and so you do have that. Another recommendation would be to allow accessory dwelling units. So that's something like the granny flat idea, so that you can, yeah. Is it difficult to hear? So that's something that just increases the compact use of land, is finding creative ways to mix uses, and so that people can live in denser communities in a more livable way.
Can we talk about some of these as a group here as we go along?
Yeah, I mean, if you have any, if you want to.
Particularly good. That one seems like a particularly good idea to me. If we want to increase the number of people living downtown, I don't know where they could, exactly build an accessory unit on, if they add it onto the back of their house, or like a mother-in-law apartment.
Right.
Is that what it is? Or if their children come back home, like a lot are,
Yeah, and then a lot of I think there's probably a lot of examples of communities that have done it in different ways, in different creative ways, so that it's in there. I mean, you might not have a lot of it happening right now, but if people are starting to move back into the downtown area, you want to be able to accommodate that without having some of the problems that you're trying to avoid with, group housing or, some of the things you don't want to have. But there are ways to write that into your zoning ordinance. Right. You probably know what they are.
We've written them before, and so I could certainly bring you one if you wanted to review it.
Okay. Well, if that's something that the Planning Commission's interested in doing as we take a look at making changes, I would certainly be interested in seeing how that would play out in our township. So, Mr. Dignan?
I guess I'd be interested in where that would fit.
Where that would fit?
Yeah.
Geographically or within the zoning ordinance?
Geographically.
Yeah, within the downtown development area, within the sewer service area.
Our downtown area, most of the houses are on .16 acre lots, and I mean,
so there's
we
very
have,
little room.
We have overhanging roofs on houses next door to them.
Right.
I mean, in
what
our
about
downtown area, accessory buildings is...
Well, that's true, but what about across US 23, for instance? There's a little larger...
yeah, I mean...
There are some homes that are on a little bit larger lots around in the sewer district, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe. It
Right.
just seems like where I've seen this before, particularly in downtown areas, it's, I mean, I can visualize it, but I just can't visualize an area in the Northfield Township area that it would fit.
Could they be apartments over garages, or, I mean, is that considered a, would be?
So often the thing with accessory dwelling units is it's really as much a matter of ownership as anything else. So what we're permitting is for there to be another habitable space on the same property. So it really kind of is a density thing, and not so, but then the way that we control that is by saying, well, does your space have 2 kitchen facilities, 2 complete bathrooms, 2 complete living spaces? And then you can organize it however you want. You can insist that it be attached, you can insist that it be detached, you can say, I don't really care as long as there are setbacks. You can have performance standards, however, whatever it's important to us to control for, we can.
Okay. Mr. Kuzno?
I'm curious, why would we want to limit it to only the downtown area? We have 5 acre lots. There's plenty of room to do something like that in the 5 acre lots. I mean,
Right.
and that would be something that would be more reasonable than downtown as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Right, it would make more sense.
Yeah, really, I don't know, it wouldn't have to be, it's really up to you. I mean, if it's,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
now that I think
I
of it.
mean, I believe that duplex is a doable, forgive my terminology, it is a allowed, permitted use in agricultural right now.
Okay. Mr. Stanilecho?
I don't have any problem putting this down as something we want to address, but I'd say we have a list of priorities that we already have passed at the beginning of the year, that if we're going to add on to it, it should go at the bottom of that list till we finish all the ones we already basically said we want to tackle.
Any other comments? Okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks. I'm going to move on to the site plan review requirements. So these are the things to think about when doing site plan review. So does the site plan require a description of the existing natural features on the site? And it does, so that's good. Requiring review by agencies when applicable, other agencies like the Water Resources Commission, DEQ, that sort of thing, and it does. Requires stormwater management plan. So I saw in there, it requires a description of the stormwater drainage, but not a plan. And I don't know, are you familiar with the procedure for stormwater? Do you have an engineer consultant who reviews?
We do, and I would ask him if it covers these sort of...
Right.
I suspect he does cover these. He's pretty thorough.
Good, good. And you do, I'm just looking ahead, you do require Water Resources Commissioner review, which is good because they have some of the best stormwater rules in the state. So if they are also providing a review, you're probably catching a lot of the provisions that you'll want to see. Some communities have their own stormwater ordinance. So that's something you could consider if you want to be proactive and have your own stormwater ordinance. We would recommend that it follow the Water Resource Commission rules. So just depends if you want to have your own review. And again, the same with stormwater, or with soil erosion. You require a soil erosion plan for site condominiums, but I'm unclear where the standards are, if they're the townships or the counties, and that might be something that your engineer would know. I'm sure they would know.
Okay.
So that might be something we could show them.
Okay, we could check with.
Yeah. And then in terms of open space, land preservation, land conservation, I had talked about this already in terms of having a land preservation program, like a lot of the surrounding communities, Ann Arbor Township, Webster Township, Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Greenbelt. So having your own preservation board, Salem Township has one as well. So that's something that we would recommend that you have if you're interested in doing that. Key natural areas for protection identified, and that's something that we looked at when we did the green infrastructure workshop. So you kind of have something to start with that map over there. That is sort of your natural areas network. And we would recommend adopting that in some way, including it in your master plan, so that you have that there, and so it's always being considered when you're reviewing developments.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
When you, when we adopt the green infrastructure plan, what does that entail exactly? Like
Most communities, I don't know why this is in the zoning elements part, but most communities adopt it in their master plan. And so it's a map, it's just one of the maps that's in their master plan that shows where their green infrastructure network is. And then they have policies that talk about, as we allow development, we want to stay away from that. Another community, Brighton Township, has actually in their zoning ordinance a natural areas overlay chapter. I think Marlene has a copy of that.
I have a picture.
Okay. I have a copy of it as well. But I can always email that to you. But it has basically a similar map to that one. And within those natural areas, they make it an overlay zone, and within the overlay zone you have to do natural features impact statement, and the idea is to stay out of the actual natural areas as you're allowing development. And so they have put that into their zoning ordinance.
So when I read that, just so that I'm understanding it right, so they adopted the green infrastructure map that gave them the natural areas.
Right.
And then wrote an ordinance that applied to those areas, which basically required a much more careful review.
Right. Okay. And I haven't actually talked with them about how they implement that and how it relates to their other zoning provisions, because they also have natural features protection and they have a setbacks from waterways, I think regardless of whether it's in this overlay or not. So I'm not entirely clear how it's that different really from having various natural features protections in your zoning ordinance. So it would be good to probably talk, if you decide to think about doing this in your zoning ordinance, it would be good to talk to them, I'm sure, and see if they're using it, how they're using it. So that's one way that you would adopt a green infrastructure plan. Having incentives for open space protection, cluster designs, making open space, clustering open space developments, that kind of thing, easy to do. A lot of communities, all communities have open space development type provisions in their zoning ordinance because it's a state law. So you have to allow for, if the developer wants to cluster development so that you're preserving more open space on a development by development basis. But you could also provide incentives because it's a pattern of land development that you would like to see because it consumes less natural area, so you could provide density bonuses, say, in an area.
We actually have 150, up to 150% density
Oh,
bonus.
good. I didn't see that. Okay.
For our open space preservation.
Great. And is it, if a developer elects, is it something that a developer would elect to do in any given zoning district?
Right.
And do they need to do, is it sort of administratively more difficult if they decide to do that, or is it the same kind of site plan review process?
I think they have to do a parallel plan.
Okay.
And then and they have to meet different criteria. They get a certain amount of bonus based on the design,
Right, okay.
the quality of the building.
Good.
And,
Okay, well, that's good.
So, yeah,
I missed
and
that.
up to 150%
Okay.
bonus. But those, that's only available off of paved roads. So would you recommend that be available off of dirt roads also?
I think so.
Okay.
It all depends. I mean, in a rural area where people are on septic, the septic is usually the limiting factor in how dense you can make it. So it's probably not going to get, I don't know, probably not going to get dense enough where it's going to be, maybe, it'd be a problem for the gravel road capacity. Don't quote me on that, but that might be a consideration.
Okay. Great.
And then there's more specific things about the open space. When you have an open space development, recommending allowable uses in open space restricted to agriculture or low impact uses, and you do have that. You have open space protection through easements when you do one of these cluster developments, so that's good. Again, the PDR program, that's something that we would recommend. We would recommend any township have that as a way of preserving agricultural or rural land. And then again, here's that density question. Zoning for large blocks, very low density. And this is a recommendation that you see in all the planning professional documents, statewide, nationwide. So that's something that, like, again, I recognize is difficult to do. But having large blocks of rural area is very helpful to preserving agriculture, because they need to have large blocks of agricultural usage to keep sort of economically going as an agricultural use. So for natural features requirements, this is something that's very, very directly related to water quality. Setbacks on waterways. We recommend a 100-foot setback. It's very common to have a 100-foot setback, so anytime you have a development, you want to keep the buildings at least 100 feet away from a creek or a stream or a lake. You currently have a 50-foot setback, so I think one of the things should be a high recommendation is to increase that to 100. That's the case in Ann Arbor Township, Ann Arbor City, Scioto Township, Webster Township, Green Oak Township, Hamburg. I'm not sure about Hamburg, but many townships have that 100-foot setback, and that was what we would recommend.
That's not very realistic or feasible, especially within the lots around our lakefront, around Horseshoe
Yeah,
Lake.
in lakefront areas, it can be difficult. However, if it's existing, it won't apply because of if it's existing development and redevelopment.
Then if there's an empty lot,
It would make it unbuildable.
it makes it unbuildable, and that's not.
Yeah.
That's too stringent and
I
too
think
ridiculous as well.
do you have a lot of empty lots around lakes?
We have several, yes.
A few empty lots?
There are a number around Whitmore Lake, and there is a considerable high number around Horseshoe Lake.
So something that Linden Township, because they have, Linden Township and Dexter Township ran into this as well. So what do we do about these, so the old cottages that are now residences, and they were always on small lots, always right up to the lake. You know, we don't want to take that value away from those property owners. They actually did it kind of district by district, so they had lake district areas, and they looked at what the current setbacks are for the current houses, and that became the required setback. So it's kind of looking at what the existing pattern is. And then in the remainder of the township, where you want to protect your creeks, not just the lakes, you had the 100-foot setback. So that's something you could look into doing. And Linden has done that, and Dexter Township is working on doing that now. Because they have a lot of lakes out there.
Okay.
And then another kind of setback would be a vegetated buffer setback, and I mentioned that before, is the best way to protect water quality in an immediate way is just allowing vegetation to grow at least 25 feet from the edge of the waterway. So you have that, so that's terrific. Then the idea of a wetland protection ordinance. They're considered a natural feature and are protected as part of your zoning ordinance. We recommend that you would expand that protection not just to include wetlands that are protected, that are DEQ protected wetlands, but to protect all wetlands. And the reason why is because wetlands of any size perform many water quality benefits. The Ann Arbor Township has a wetland protection ordinance that does not distinguish on acreage. And what they do is that the state law protects 5-acre or larger wetlands, or any wetlands that are connected to a waterway, or adjacent to a waterway, or within 500 feet of a waterway. Actually, honestly, it always ends up being a DEQ protected wetland, because Michigan is just, we're so wet, we have waterways all over the place. But there are isolated wetlands that are providing very important services that I think the township would benefit from looking at. And the way it works in a local wetland protection ordinance is that wetlands that don't fall within that DEQ purview, the township would look at them on a site-by-site level to decide if they meet these certain criteria. And they're all written out in the state law already, and we have worked with townships. And so it's not something you'd have to reinvent. So you have to look at if it's a small wetland, you would look and see if it's special ecologically, if it's meeting particular stormwater requirements. And so it's something that we would recommend you look at doing, is adding some stronger wetland protection elements into your ordinance. And it would be a standalone ordinance. By state law, wetland protection needs to be in a standalone ordinance, not part of your zoning ordinance. So that's something we can help you with as well.
So do they require us to have one?
No, that's I read that this afternoon, and I was like, that's not what I meant to say. It requires, if you're going to have a local ordinance, it requires communities to protect wetlands through a standalone ordinance. It doesn't require you to have an ordinance. So that's not very clearly written.
Yeah. The challenge is it's so expensive for a landowner, so if someone wants to do something and there even is the hint of a wetland on their property, then you've got to get an expert to come out and take a look at all the vegetation and everything else, and so people are kind of
we've found that what's happened in the townships I've worked with, and I'm a planning commissioner in Ann Arbor Township, and we've had a wetland ordinance for many years, is people just typically just to stay out of the wetland, and so they don't have to do a delineation.
Because the problem is, where's the edge? You know, is it those horsetail? I mean, is it horsetail? You know.
Yeah, if you are going to be near, if you're going to be doing something near or in a wetland, then you would have to have a delineation. The state of Michigan, the DEQ now has a wetland mapping service, and I don't know it's probably not free, but it's something that the township could use as a way of at least mapping out where those wetlands are to even determine if you would need to move forward with a wetland ordinance, with a wetland permit. Did you?
Yeah, we have, in our office, we have the DEQ's wetland layers, and so at least for a preliminary exam, we can lay the parcels over it, and we would know in seconds. It wouldn't be, too much trouble.
Okay.
Other questions about that? I know wetland ordinances, it can be kind of sticky subjects. All right.
How is that impacted in ag?
Agriculture is exempt.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Groundwater recharge areas, you do have provisions for that, so that's recommended. Your natural features section prohibits direct and indirect discharge of hazardous substances. You do have steep slope protection. The woodland and landscape tree protection, you do require you require tree removal outside of the agricultural district. How is this reading? Township requires tree removal outside of agricultural district and aside from removal in order to build structures. So then you need to review tree removal, I guess, outside the agricultural district. And that's in the woodland section of your ordinance.
Yeah, these are like landmark trees or something?
Right, right. But you do require mitigation for tree removal, which is good.
Yeah.
But it sounds like not in the agricultural district.
I don't know. That's part of the ordinance we didn't get to yet.
Okay.
I mean, we were methodically going through our
Okay.
ordinance, and then
Yeah.
we stopped after a period, and
Okay.
so we should pick that up again. but-
Okay, yeah, you can take a look at that, and I can
Yeah.
show you some samples from other communities. There's a whole gamut from landmark tree protection only up to woodland or woodlot protection, and various communities have, wanted to get into it at various levels. And then I had mentioned the Brighton Township Ordinance language, so that's something that you could also look at as an example. Now, impervious surface reductions, how can you, on any given development, make sure that you're not creating so much impervious surface? There are ways to reduce impervious surface. One way is to have flexible lot coverage standards so that you don't just have 1 acre lot, 1 acre lot, 1 acre lot. You could reduce that, reduce the driveway lengths, reduce people have their own housing sizes, but just reduce the amount of impervious surface you're using per lot. And you do have that in your PUD and your open space districts, which is good. We do have required yard setbacks, so having a yard setback that's very long, so the front setback from the road or rear or side, they actually recommend reducing those because that reduces the amount of impervious surface, because you're reducing your lot size, you're reducing, and this all gets into the open space development concept and the PUD concept where you're actually using more compact development standards. So that's something that you might want to take a look at your yard setbacks. So you have tables in your zoning ordinance that have setbacks, and making them more flexible any way that you can, allowing them to be smaller any way that you can would be recommended.
Okay.
Allowing bioretention, rain gardens, filter strips, those are all just different ways of, so you're sort of creating depressions in the ground that can gather stormwater and allow stormwater to infiltrate into the ground so it doesn't just run right off into the creek. So any way you can allow those features, say in parking lots, commercial landscape areas, so that, if you picture a parking lot, if the water off of that parking lot runs into the ground before it goes out into the road, into the storm system, you're saving a lot of that water and you're reducing pollution into the lake. Flexible parking standards, so the same token as the yard setbacks, having parking standards that allow either less parking. A lot of communities are going with, instead of having a minimum parking requirement, they have a maximum parking space requirement. So they don't want to have these giant parking lots like you see at the Rave Theater, which is never even half full. You think of all that impervious surface they didn't really have to build. Well, that was required by Pittsfield Township to have those, and so they didn't really need them. So taking a look at your parking standards and really thinking about, is this really the amount of parking that we need? And again, it's something we can help you with, and look at other communities, and that's something you can probably help with. So stormwater, so like I mentioned before, you do have review by the Water Resources Commission, which is great. And I had mentioned before, considering adopting your own stormwater ordinance is something other communities do. Depends on the level of administrative involvement that the township wants to be involved in. And then some other things, again, I think we can talk to the township engineer about soil erosion and sedimentation. I couldn't really find a lot in the zoning ordinance about that. I don't know if you have the septic system. That's really a county health thing, isn't it? I don't know if that's something that the township gets involved in.
The point of sale, that's a county.
That's also county. And I
requirement.
think that Washtenaw County might have that.
They do.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I was
Well,
on the
good.
board when we passed that.
Good.
Yeah.
Both functioning water and sewer.
What's that?
county level, they require inspection of both water
Oh,
and
water?
sewer.
They've added
Oh,
water?
okay.
Okay.
Yes, they did.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Roman.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before we get too far along the yard setbacks, can you explain that again? Reducing yard setbacks would decrease impervious surfaces?
Yeah, so if you
I would
can-
think it'd be the opposite. If you increase the setbacks, you have less areas that would be dedicated to be used.
Well, there's a couple things there. One is just if you think about a typical acre lot development, say, and your yard setbacks are 100 feet from the road. I think they're I don't know what they are here, but
50
I don't remember.
I think 50.
50, some communities are 100, and then I don't know if they're 25 or 50 yard side setbacks, and then there's sometimes a back setback. That just requires you to have larger lots in order to put a house in. And it requires a longer driveway. And it probably will end up with larger homes, because on those larger lots you'll have larger homes.
Okay.
In addition to that, turf grass is more impervious than natural area, landscaping, natural wood, whatever was there before. So you're adding impervious surface not only through the driveway and the roads, but the turf grass is also somewhat impervious. So that's how it adds impervious surface. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the last thing I had to do with native vegetation. So I've talked a lot about native vegetation performing ecological services like infiltrating water, cleaning the air, all of those good things. I would consider a couple things in your zoning ordinance. One is you do have a couple of invasive species listed in your plant materials for transition strips and landscaping, so I would be happy to look at that specifically and check off the ones that we would recommend not allowing. And I would even consider just requiring landscape plants to be native to Michigan. There's plenty of native plants that can be used for landscaping these days. So
Okay.
those are all of the elements.
Does anyone have any questions of Ms. Olson on anything that she's brought forward to us tonight? Well, I don't have any more questions. I see that we have some opportunities that would be relatively easy and probably semi-no-brainers to do. So I guess I would like to take a look as we move through our zoning ordinance. We don't have to do this all right now, but as we move through our zoning ordinance with updates, we should be able to pick up on some of these things.
Great. And we'd be happy to participate if you want to form a subcommittee or a working session or something like that.
Right.
Pick a few, like you said, priority items. You have a priority list already. Think about which of these might go in that priority list. And we're happy to work with you. We're searching for continued funding for this project, which would include continuing to work with communities where we've already done these workshops. So
Okay.
hopefully we can keep doing it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Right. Well, I would appreciate hearing, later. Oh, well, yes, thank you, Ms. Olson. And this is a great map. So I would appreciate hearing from the rest of the commissioners at some point about what they liked about the changes here and what you might want to prioritize doing in the future about making these changes to our ordinance. Now, the master plan is a ways off yet, so these ones we'll keep in our folder and plan to do that unless someone else feels really strongly we should do that immediately, but I think that's probably not the case. Okay. So let me know here, especially about these zoning ordinance elements, and Leah Dumichel will be able to help us with a lot of that, getting it going. Actually, she'll be doing it all. Thank you. Okay. If there's nothing else on that, we'll move ahead to new business, Planning Commission bylaws. And Ms. Dumichel took a look at our bylaws and compared it to what's out there and what the requirements are, and has given us a lot of opportunities here. So I'll let you handle that, Mr. Michelle.
So my understanding was that the two things that you wanted me to look at with regard to the bylaws were the procedure for changing them and what is required to be in the minutes. So I reviewed for those two things. As I said on the document that I gave to you, I started with the township's bylaws, went to the Planning Enabling Act because it's good to know what's required. Because they're the minutes, I read the Open Meetings Act, and then I just started looking at samples. So the Michigan Association of Planning and the Michigan State University Extension both offer sample bylaws. They're good resources, so I looked at those. I happened across one quote just in my research that I liked from the Michigan Municipal League. They didn't really have sample bylaws. They just had a planning commissioner's handbook that had a phrase I liked. Pittsfield and Dexter Township bylaws were both recommended to me by the Planning Commission chair, and having worked in the city of Ypsilanti with both their staff and their planning commissioners, I knew their kind of approach to be pretty reasonable, and so I just pulled theirs too and read them. So I thought maybe the best approach here would be to just, with regard to the two items I was asked to look at, to just read through all the documents and pull together everything that I found so that we can talk about it here if you'd like to. And then while I was just doing my my first read of the bylaws, I was a little confused by the conflict of interest section, and I thought maybe it could be a little clearer. And there were just a couple little wording changes that I suggested. So let's start with the substance. So the minutes, the current language doesn't really have any requirements. It just says that a recording secretary may be employed to record and prepare the minutes, and compensation shall be recommended. The Michigan Planning Enabling Act requires them. So at the bare minimum, we're required to keep a public record of resolutions, transactions, findings, and determinations. And then after that, you can see, boy, Michigan State University, I don't know if you guys work with Kurt Schindler at all, but boy, he writes a page for everything, doesn't he? So those are an example of some very thorough minutes or instructions that cover every last detail, and then there's some much more brief ones. This is where I liked the suggestion from the Michigan Municipal League, because they're kind of just trying to get at having the end in mind. So minutes should contain enough detail so that a person not present can understand what matters were discussed, who spoke at the meeting, and the general content of their comments, including name and address, what action was taken by the commission, including vote and conditions, why that action was taken, and on what standards of the ordinance it was based. So that seemed like it wasn't laying out, you must have this, that, and the other thing, but had enough detail to provide for clarity. But it's not, by any means the required one. That's just what I thought looked like the best one. But we could just restate the requirements in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act if you would like. So, yes.
I just want to get a clarification. Exactly what are the bylaws supposed to be doing? What is the whole purpose of the bylaws? Well, your interpretation of it, so obviously it's going to be your opinion.
Sure, absolutely. Although I did do a little looking into it because, in order to figure out whether or not it has any teeth, then the question is, well, what are they? And the definition that I found was they're a set of rules and procedures governing the actions of the Planning Commission. So my understanding is that they do not have any teeth in that nobody is going to be hauled off to jail, but they're an expression, their violation would certainly be a breach of integrity, which, yeah, go ahead.
So basically, it's how we function here in our meetings.
It is
how we function, and then it's not so much an explanation of what our duties and responsibilities are, because that's covered underneath the state statutes. The Planning Enabling Act actually dictates what the Planning Commission's duties and responsibilities are in detail. So that's already covered. So our bylaws are essentially how we function as a group. That's essentially, that's my interpretation,
Sure.
in my opinion.
But I think that can be read as how you carry out your duties and functions. I'm not sure that they're entirely separate, and that's why they seem to cover a lot of the same things, I think.
Well, if the duties and responsibilities are dictated by state statute, we don't have the ability in a bylaw to basically say anything different than what the state requires us.
You don't have the ability to say anything less, but you could certainly expound upon it. You could agree that we are going to go beyond the transactions, findings, that would be the agreement part of it. But
I'm not sure if we can extend state law into something more specific.
Okay, well, here's what I think. I think that the Michigan Planning Enabling Act transfers the police power of the state onto the Planning Commission, right? That's how we get to decide upon matters of health, safety, and welfare. So if the Planning Commission has duly passed a set of bylaws, I wouldn't think that they have no force at all. It's certainly a matter of record. It's certainly an agreement.
All I'm trying to get to is that basically our bylaws are how we function as a group.
Sure.
That's basically what we're getting at. So how we deal with the public, what we deal with for our minutes, how we deal with how we determine our meeting times, how we deal our agendas, all those things, that how we function as a group, what the bylaws are essentially, what we're dictating on those bylaws. Those are what's governing how we're acting.
Yes, if I'm understanding you correctly, I totally agree with it.
Okay.
Do you want to discuss any changes to the minutes, to the section of the bylaws that relate to minutes, or do you want me to just move on?
Well, what it really, I mean, all of us can read this, so, and I believe all of us have, but the whole interpretation of our bylaws and reading through them is that there's a lot of stuff in our current bylaws that essentially are just a pull out and dictate of what state statutes are. If you read through the areas, purposes, responsibilities, and duties that we have down in here, they're essentially direct copies from the state statutes, because I looked at them.
Okay.
So, I mean, in my opinion, that's actually not what we are doing and functioning as a group. That's telling more what our duties and responsibilities are, which in my opinion is a separate document. So what I want to try and get to, and I would like to direct this, because I had a conversation that I asked Howard if he would end up doing this, is to have him look through our bylaws, see what can be tweaked, removed, determined, that we can then look at as a functioning group and get it streamlined. That includes all the things you've just recommended to us. And that's what I would like to see happen.
I think it's a waste of time. I mean, we just went through this a year and a half ago or less, and we did improve it some. There's a few things we could change based on what Ms. Dumichel has suggested, but I don't see any reason to gut them just to now go to state law to look at, now we're looking in 3 different places or 2 different places to find out how we should function. I don't see that that's of value. The bylaws are how we operate ourselves, and there can be different ways of doing it. We can have 2/3 of a vote of the commission. We could have, to amend the bylaws. We can have the notices given to us 15 days ahead of time. The prior meeting 3 days ahead of time. There are rules that how we operate, how it works for us, and I don't see any reason to eliminate, something that's worked for us.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
following
Fink.
Planning Commissioner Chick's comments, I'd like to speak.
Okay, Ms. Chick.
Yeah, we just agreed on these bylaws recently. I guess my question is to look at it backwards, is what is it that, does this Planning Commission as a whole feel does not allow us to function the way we should function based on what we've got already? I mean, I don't think we need to tear it apart either. I think you want to tweak a couple of things, fine, if they have to be tweaked. But they've been working for us so far, and so I don't understand what the problem with the bylaws is that's causing an issue with us functioning the way we have to function, specifically.
Mr. Dignan.
We've been working diligently over the past couple of years to reduce redundancies out of our ordinances. We have redundancies in our bylaws that are redundant to state law. So if someone wants to look at how we operate, they may look at the state law to see what our statutory responsibilities and duties are. And then they look at our bylaws, which there are differences between the two. I think Mr. Stanalicho raises a good point that these are the set of policies we've adopted to work with each other and to work as a planning commission together. I think that items that are dictated in the statutory law don't necessarily need to be reiterated here. I mean, if it simply said, the officers of the Planning Commission will operate as stated in the Planning and Enabling Act, I think that would be fine. This should be streamlined to the operations of this board and how it's going to conduct its business. We've eliminated rhetoric out of our planning and out of our ordinances. I do see Mr. Stanalicho's recommendation as having some merit that we may want to consider. I certainly don't consider us looking at the policies of how we operate with each other and in this board a waste of time. It was over 1.5 years ago that we looked at this. The board has changed a little. I think it's a valid request.
I'd like to see them side by side. I personally don't know what one says that's different than this. And that would be a valid request also.
I think that's exactly why we need to do this.
Mr.
Because if you don't know, the public doesn't know.
And if we don't have both copies in front of us, we're not going to know either. Ms. Chick, you have another comment?
So wouldn't it be a function of the Planning Commission to do this as opposed to anybody outside the Planning Commission doing this? I mean, if you're aware of those redundancies, can't you just bring them to the Planning Commission and point them out?
I would think so.
I think that there's actually a bigger policy issue here, guys. So there are a number of areas, there are a number of places in your bylaws where there has been a choice to be more restrictive than state law. And there are times when that is permissible and there are times when that's not. And frankly, I think that there's some additional legal research that probably needs to be done here. Let's take a look at one particular area of the bylaws under conflict of interest. So under the law of conflict of interest, I don't know. I read this.
Ms. Dumichelle has something of conflict of interest. Oh, on her, well, I don't know. I don't have the first page.
Can somebody say where it is?
I'm looking.
Okay, so
8.9.
So under the law of conflict of interest is related to a pecuniary relationship, pecuniary interest, a financial gain from one person to another. I don't have any issues with A. I don't have any issues with B. I'm not sure. No issues with C. D. D is an interesting one. D states a matter that would give rise to the appearance of impropriety. Now, there is nothing in the law that indicates that the appearance of impropriety rises to a level of a conflict of interest. The problem with the statement is not that we would all agree that if there's an appearance of impropriety, we ought to address that. But you further go on to say what basis you can remove a planning commission member for. And there's statements in here as to the Board of Trustees' relationship of removing a planning commission member. Are you wishing to adopt a set of documents that The Board of Trustees can remove a planning commission member because a group has indicated that they feel that they've given rise to the appearance of impropriety when no impropriety exists. So herein lies the policy consideration. And there's multiple places in the document where the bylaws have gone over and above what is considered under Michigan statute and the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. There are places in the bylaws that indicates a vote on a master plan amendment that states that you need 6 votes
Right.
to change the master plan. These are all fundamental policy considerations. And I frankly don't remember this conversation occurring a year ago. And so I would argue that it is a very valid exercise. I'm not going to get into the debate of whether or not something should be in a document or out of a document, if it's redundant or not redundant, and those are the conversations for you all to have and determine what your goals and objectives are. And you know, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's some real policy issues in this bylaws, and I think everyone on this commission needs to read these bylaws in full and decide if these are the policies that you want to abide by. That's the question. And the legal question has to be answered is in the instances where you've gone above and beyond the requirements of state law under the Michigan Planning and Enabling Act, is that permissible?
Mr.
I
Michelle.
think in this particular question, it is. The MPEA says unless the legislative body defines conflict of interest, the Planning Commission is required to do so. The enabling ordinance here says that the Planning Commission is required to define conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So in this case- No, that's fine. I'm just saying that this-
Wait.
Please. Removing a Planning Commission member, okay, is a significant step. So whether or not this board can choose to rise above and define conflict of interest as higher than state statute is one question. The action, the resulting action of the decision of how it's worded to remove a sitting planning commission member from a board because of the appearance of impropriety, if no impropriety exists, is a pretty significant action. And my point to this planning commission is that you need to read the bylaws and ask the question, are these the policy considerations that you want to govern yourselves? Do you want to have to get 6 votes for a master plan amendment? If the answer to that question is yes, then it's perfectly fine. Then the question needs to be asked, is that allowable? It's not just about the conflict of interest section. There are other sections in the bylaws that go over and above statute. So, you know, these are big issues.
The Board of Trustees are the ones, after a public hearing, aren't they, that remove a commissioner for nonfeasance, malfeasance, or misfeasance, right? Is that true?
Right,
Where
but
is
you
that?
define misfeasance, malfeasance, or you define that as either A, B, C, or D.
Well, potentially, then one of them we may need to adjust.
Precisely my
Okay.
point.
Right, but I don't think it's a wholesale, you know, redo of these.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, okay.
What I'm saying is there are places in the bylaws that create a more restrictive perspective than state law requires. Let's look at it this way. Do you want to have 6 votes to approve a master plan?
Yes. I do.
Okay, does everybody else?
So it's a rhetorical question, so
That's my point. The point is that these are the policy considerations that need to be researched, and you all need to resolve.
Okay, then we should have people carefully look at these and bring their comments, have something to compare them to. And I think Ms. Dumichel put together a good list of items here, so we should just go ahead and see what is appropriate from hers.
Which is why it is I suggested that we have Mr. Fink look over our bylaws and make recommendations to us.
Mr. Fink is not staff to this planning commission.
Who is staff?
Excuse me.
Who's staff?
Who's staff?
Ms. Dumichel.
Mr. Fink is also the township manager. He is staff to this board.
No, he's told me he's not staff.
Guys, I'm not going to get into this kind of debate. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
I'm here to help. Clearly, there's some conflict and disagreement as to how folks want things to run. I'm bringing up some issues that are of importance to the Planning Commission and how you function moving forward. Ms. Dumichel's research on this, I took a look at it. It's pretty thorough as well. She did a good job. I didn't sort of, it wasn't intended to correct her, but it's intended to point out that yes, you can pass bylaws over and above statute. I do agree with that. It's the question of what's the result, what's the impact of those decisions, and I don't remember us having that conversation a year ago when we looked at the bylaws as to those two areas. There's areas in there about the budget that are pretty significant to this board, how that operates. But I'm sorry, but I'm just not, for those who are on the board, I'm just not going to, I'm here to help. I'm not going to get into, I want this person to do it and I want this. And unfortunately, I felt disrespected in that moment.
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chair.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Could you provide us a memo listing those items that are problematic?
I think that's exactly what Mr. Stanalicho was asking
Okay.
for. That's
Exactly
exactly what he was
for.
asking for, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I can certainly provide a memo with areas of items that I think deserve review.
Okay.
And are important policy considerations.
Thank you. Ms. Chick?
In order to not have redundancy, if there are items that already Ms. Dumichel have presented, then can we just have those that aren't? So that instead of having two people doing the same thing,
I guess I'd like to see things side by side. Is that a possibility? We used to do the strike-through and the add, and so we could tell, or two documents side by side where it says, might say this is all state law and we don't need to repeat it, or how are we going to know what's new and what's not new? So,
Sorry.
Mr. Kuzno.
I don't see a problem with including the state law in our bylaws. If I'm a citizen trying to find out what this planning commission's about, I don't have to look through 5 different documents and do a full library of research to find out what's going on. I'd like to know how it's defined at the state and how we abide by that as well, and whatever our provisions that are different than that are also. I don't see why this, I've been on this board for how many years? 4 or 5 years now. I don't think, conflict of interest has never come up once. Several of the same staff members were here at the time we did this thing. This did not come up then. I don't know why it's coming up now versus then and now. There's obviously something going on in the background that some of us don't know about, and it's frustrating on my side. And I'm sure it's frustrating to a lot of people out in our citizenry.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Dignan.
I mean, I can address, if the board members here forget, the reason that some of this was brought up is because this planning commission has not been operating by its bylaws. We've been operating outside of our bylaws for years. We have. We haven't done what's required. We haven't done what we've asked our own policies to be. The standard that we've held ourselves up to, we haven't lived up to that standard for years. The question came up when Mr. Stanalicho stepped up to take the position of secretary. He says, I have some duties that are defined by the operating policies of this board that I have to fulfill. That's what he came to this board and said. And it seems to be like it's been the biggest conflict in the world from day one when he mentioned that. That is true. We don't operate by these bylaws. If we're not operating by them, throw them out. If we want to operate by them, reform them. We need to go through them, and we need to go through them thoroughly, and we need to make sure that if it says it in here, are we doing it? If we're not doing it, do we want to do it or do we not? If we don't want to do it, take it out. If we do want to operate with each other that way, then by golly, we have to live up to that and do what it says we do.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Roman, please.
I agree, but somebody has to do the footwork to come up with the specifics as to what we're addressing in our bylaws and what needs to be looked at. So far, I haven't seen anything except the document that we received for tonight, which has very minimal changes on it. So if somebody's so inclined to do that, I'd be willing to look at it. I personally don't have an issue with most of the things in here, and I don't see a total gut job. The answer, I don't believe, is just refer to the state law and take these and throw them out. That's not the answer for me either. So there's a lot of talk about we're not following things, haven't been for years. I'm sure it comes down to a few specific items. If you would be so inclined to point those out, I think it'd be a much more productive meeting for us all.
Well, I've pointed them out
Instead
numerous
of
times
saying,
before.
let's just throw everything out and refer to the state law.
I pointed them out when I was secretary.
I haven't seen them.
Madam Chair.
I beg to differ, but we should.
No, Madam Chair, I'd like the table. I would, because I did point them out. I pointed them out to you, and you agreed with me. And it goes down to the duties of the secretary. And you go, oh, well, we don't do it that way. That's what you told me. We don't do it that way. But we do. In our policies, it says we do, and we haven't. That hasn't changed from that day. Mr. Stanalicho has decided to pursue that issue in much more detail. I mean, we have not, when you get straight down to the area that I'm speaking of.
Yeah.
Hang on. You know, and some of it comes down to signing of all completed site plans, signing and recording approved minutes, and submitting attendance records. This has not been done by the secretary of this board. Reading upon request correspondence from the planning commission meetings. We're still not doing that. Calling and noticing special meetings. Now that particular item is done by staff, and that's a delegated responsibility. And you know, restating motions, we actually ask that Lisa does some of that. But some of these things, this is a policy. This is a policy that we govern ourselves by, and we're not following it.
Right.
And that's one. Another one that I'll raise right now happened tonight when you shut me down when a member of the public was speaking.
You should not be doing that.
That
when
is
a
not
member of
true.
the public is speaking.
Under Article 8, Section 13.1, under citizen participation, commission discussion of any raised issue may result in questions directed back to the individual or representative of an organization or group addressing this commission. And that is under the section of citizen participation. I absolutely have the right to direct a question to them.
Not while he is speaking.
According to our bylaws, I have that right.
Then we'll have to change that.
Well, exactly Mr. Stanalicho's point, Ms.
I'm reading the Robert's Rules of Order, and we should not be interrupting our speakers as they come up here.
Ms. Shockley, again, that is what Mr. Stanalicho brought up. That is why we are doing this. And you said, well, that needs to change. That's why we're asking that we go through this, is because as we point out these things that are not being governed properly, that we're not doing, you find issue with them as well. So let's do this right.
I interpreted that differently, that we don't interrupt our public as they're speaking to us. That was my interpretation.
But when they're addressing us directly, we have that right. By our bylaws. We may not follow them, but by our bylaws. I'm just saying.
There were, I will admit, there are things in the bylaws that we have not done for years that I brought up with Mr. Luan. We were going to get a stamp. We were, you know, there's a whole lot of administrative stuff that has not happened for a long time. And that needs to be corrected and done properly and according to our bylaws. So, Mr. Roman, you had another comment.
I just have the point to make that I'm open to look at any particular item on the whole document. If these things were known over a year, why are we sitting here tonight without any highlights on the copy from somebody?
Well, the two items that we were bringing up were
I understand,
minutes and.
but now we're looking at, you know, I'm coming to the meeting prepared to look at what was presented to me as a package, in the package. And now we have numerous things on there, and I'm not opposed to looking at them, but obviously we can't look at them tonight. Right. So somebody's going to have to produce what they would like to see in it and what not like to see in it, and we would have to review it again. I mean, that's just being productive.
I agree.
Sitting here bickering, I don't feel it's not for anybody's advantage.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Iaquinto hasn't spoken.
That's one of the reasons why I am in favor of Mr. Fink doing their review. He has the history with this planning commission and has listened to us for several years on what issues we are bringing forward that definitely need to be changed, where Mrs. DiMichele does not have that history right now.
Okay.
Ms.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
please,
Fink, go ahead.
please allow me to speak.
Yes, please.
I'm not going to get into the middle of this, folks. You know, I'm not going to be the brunt of additional conflict on this board. That is not my intent. I would, if the commission would indulge me for 5 minutes, and I will not take more than 5 minutes of your time, I will go through the document and indicate to you the areas that I think might need to be looked at that I've already done, and then you all should have the conversation amongst yourselves. It's not that big of a deal to go through and say, are these the areas? Is this what we? Is this good language for us? So give me 5 minutes, and I'd like to do that.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure that I want to go through this bylaws in this moment at this point and create a whole document and kind of get in the middle of, you know, conflict here when I'm not exactly sure what the direction is. So.
Okay, I would like to move that Mr. Fink go ahead and do this right now.
Support.
And so we can hear his comments. Okay, I have a motion by Chalkley, support by Mr. Dignan to hear Mr. Fink. Any more discussion on that? Mr. Roman?
I would much prefer to see something presented at a later time.
In writing.
And also from our planning expert, Ms. DiMichele. I would like to see her take right from page 1 through page 13.
Okay.
And without using other examples of other townships, just go straight down ours, correct what is over and above if necessary, and let's do it that way. That's what I would like to see. I don't want to put Mr. Fink in that position tonight.
I agree.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Dignan, go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Roman, and I withdraw my support.
Okay. The motion is, well, I will withdraw my motion. Okay, Mr. Stanilecho.
Well, first of all, in all this conversation, I want to address Mr. Kuzno's idea that there's something, you know, backdooring or something going on behind the scenes. I was not on this planning commission when this was adopted. When I got appointed to this planning commission, the first thing I asked Marlene for is a copy of the bylaws.
Which I
so
sent
that,
you.
right, so that I could actually look at them and see how it is that we're supposed to be conducting our business. At that point in time, I read through it, and there's stuff down in here that it seems that whoever adopted these from last year, there was little tweaks, but this is probably the same document from 1994, I bet. So to say that it was adjusted or amended, it seems to me that it was written with a lot of things in it that you look at, it doesn't make any sense. There's section 4.14, adopt rules. Well, the whole point of the bylaws are the rules that we are adopting. What's that section doing in there? all I'm saying is that I would like to have the thing reviewed, and we should be able to review this and not just go, well, it's been working and this is exactly the way it is, and just pass the thing, when there needs to be some sections that need to be adjusted
Okay.
to make us run better. That's all. There's nothing backdooring about this or behind the scenes. I simply asked Mr. Fink if, his comments, and asked him if somebody, either him or somebody in staff, could actually go through some of this stuff and review it for us and present it to us. And he volunteered that he would look at the stuff and do that for us. And that's all I was asking for him to do, not get in the middle of anything. He's an expert. He's a lot more expert than any of us sitting here and the times he's been doing stuff. And I would like to have him reviewing some of the stuff and give us his interpretation of it. That's all I was asking for.
Okay, can we have Mr. Dignan?
I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
that we ask Ms. Dumichel to work with staff on coming up with a line, as Mr. Roman had said he'd like to see, a line-by-line review of our bylaws. And if staff has contributions to make to that they be included as well. And that once that information has been gathered, to bring it back to this board to then review, discuss, and decide what path moving forward.
I'll support that.
Okay. We're going to have Ms. Lemble restate that motion.
Larry, one of the things you mentioned in there was, this is part of a discussion on this motion.
Well, I need to hear it restated first. Okay.
That Dumichel work with staff on a line-by-line review of the bylaws, and after that information has been gathered, it be brought back to the commission for review.
Review, discussion, and
I want to make sure that included in there was, not that I don't think it would be, but staff contributions to that I want included as well.
May I? That's a motion.
That is part of the motion.
Is there discussion?
staff. Okay, now we're going with discussion.
That
Mr. Aquinton.
Part of Mr. Roman's statement was that I, as one commissioner, don't need to see the comparisons from other communities either. So please remove that and just base it on our community.
That was just a suggestion on my part.
Okay. So, any more discussion on this motion? All right, let's roll call that one.
I just had a quick comment.
Okay, Mr. Fink, go ahead.
I'm happy to sit down with Leah. I think it's her role and responsibility to go through it line by line.
I do, too.
All I wanted to do was give you a quick overview of areas that I think you should take a look at because they're critical policy issues, and I will be happy to send a half-page memo because that's about what it's going to amount to, or a literally 5-minute quick overview of areas of key policy issues in the bylaws that I think you need to review because they dictate pretty significant items of how you function. That was the purpose. And somehow this whole thing got kind of shifted, but I mean that's my purpose. That was what I would like to do for you. That is my role. I've already given you 2 areas that are important to review. There are some others.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Mr. Dignan.
Yes.
Mr. Iaquinto.
Yes.
Ms. Chick. Yes. Ms. Chalkley.
Yes.
Stan Lecho, yes. Mr. Kuzno. Yes. Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Okay. All right, minutes of September 16th. moving on. Okay, I'll give everybody else the chance on the first page before I say something. Does anybody have a comment? Okay, I would just like added under correspondence, I know you want this brief, but under correspondence, it says Chalkley recommended an article by from the Michigan Association of Planners. I would like that to say, Chalkley recommended the recent May-June 2015 article from the Michigan Association of Planners about the roles of planning commissions and Board of Trustees. So if I were a person not being here, I would at least know and be able to go back to find out where that is, you know. Is that an issue with anyone? Okay. I can help you with that, Lisa, if you need it later. Okay. Any other changes on page 1? Page 2? Go ahead.
Under minutes, I believe that the motion carried 6-1, because I believe Ms. Chick did vote in affirmative on that.
That was my understanding also. Is that yours, Ms. Chick? Okay. Okay. And then my other change was I thought that we had discussed under policy review and discussion, that last sentence before second call to the public, Stan Alacho asked that commissioners send suggestions for bylaw changes to Mary Bird, and while you perhaps did, we had also, we're going to have them sent to Ms. Dumichel in addition. So I guess I would say and Ms. Dumichel. Is it everyone okay with that change?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I will move that we adopt the minutes as amended.
Support.
Okay, good. Motion by Chalkley, support by Dignan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, thank you. Comments from, no, call to the public. No, policy review and discussion, you're right, I missed it, sorry. Okay, someone wanted to talk about Mr. Michelle's presentation. Mr. Dignan?
No, that was myself.
Oh, Mr. Iaquinto, okay.
My point that I would like is that before, and it has been customary to all of us, that before any presentation go on to this board, that we have a chance to review it. And so, number one, the presentation, you couldn't read it. So I would have appreciated a copy beforehand in our packet so that I could have prepared and read through it properly to understand it. So I could have been engaging in that conversation, because without having the opportunity to do so, it was like a moot point without having the information beforehand. And when Mrs. DiMichele was speaking, she was speaking extremely fast, where it was difficult to understand and comprehend what she was saying. So consequently, having it beforehand to be able to read it, to be able to decipher and understand it, would have been very well appreciative. So my statement is that, as has been the practice from this board, that any presentation that's going to go on, that we have a copy of it prior to the proceeding. Any other statements from any other commissioners regarding this?
Mr. Michelle, I mean,
Yeah,
Ms. Chick.
I think it should have been part of the agenda. I mean, it was just announced at the meeting that she was doing a presentation, because I had asked to see it before the meeting and it wasn't available to us. And so, yeah, that's my only point. It should have been on the agenda as a presentation.
Right, or I feel
And
it
it was
could
hard to
wait.
see for us. I know they moved it closer.
Okay.
So.
I mean, I feel that things can wait then if we don't have an opportunity to review it. Just like has been stated here today, we all try to come to be prepared to this meeting, and it works against us not having the information prior to the meeting. So,
Okay.
please, let's all asked to follow that, and if it's not supplied to us beforehand, I'm going to ask that it not happen at that meeting, as I have asked before. So, thank you.
Any other discussion over here? Mr. Roman?
I agree. I think it's fair. It's only fair to everybody, not only the commissioners, but the people, the public. It reflects the same thing. You know, I think there's a general little bit of lack of getting finished or completed information to us, you know, prior. So I think it's a definite point that needs to be worked out.
Thank you for comment. Mr. Dignan?
Madam Chair, I would concur. I mean, we do have a packet deadline, is that correct?
We do.
I mean,
It's around Wednesday.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we need to kind of stick close to that packet deadline, and truly, if it's not there then,
Okay.
you know, because even if you send it to me the day before, that doesn't mean I have the time to be able to go through it that day. You know.
That's correct.
It's just, you know, we all have other jobs as well outside of this and families, so.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Well, I agree with that. It was it was on the agenda as a discussion item, and so to present material as a discussion item, it would have been helpful to have it earlier. I would agree. We could have canceled the meeting. I think it was our only topic that day on the agenda, and there was an attempt to move things along, but sometimes things take a little longer than you expect to get ready for, and so we could potentially cancel meetings that we're not quite prepared for a week ahead of time. Now, I would, you know, we only have between Wednesday today and generally a week or less to prepare for the next meeting, depending on what we're putting on the agenda. So it can be challenging to get things to move along very quickly. And, you know, Ms. Dumichel put a lot of time into that, and it was her opinion of the surveys, which I found valuable, and in retrospect to even think about and go back over the surveys myself to see if I drew the same conclusions. So we can all think about that. We weren't making a decision that night, but I will put myself out there to make sure that we are ready ahead of time, a week ahead of time. And if we're not, we will pull things from the agenda. So you have time to look at things. On the other hand, Mr. Luan would come and give us presentations on topics that we asked him to talk about, like how many houses per acre you could get in 80 acres. You know, we asked him to do those kind of presentations. I don't think we necessarily saw them ahead of time.
We didn't ask for a presentation.
We knew they were coming,
right.
But we
That's the difference.
didn't see ahead of time. And you know, if there's some concern about the content of some of these presentations,
there again, it's still a good practice to have that.
It's a good practice, but I think mostly there was concern about the content afterward, and that was unfortunate. But it was her professional opinion, and I, for one, want to hear our professionals tell us what they think about things. So anyway, but I will not put things on the agenda if we can't be ready for them ahead of time. Mr. Dignan.
And Madam Chair, I'd ask you to remember that you're 1/7 of the opinion of this board.
I am 1/7. That is correct.
And, you know, and while I certainly respect Ms. Dumichel's professional opinion, you know, again, communication is key. Communication creates a good workflow, and that was everything but communication.
I didn't have it either.
But you knew about it.
I had the one slide the day of, I believe it was the day of, yeah, or maybe the night before, I don't know, something like that. No, the day of? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Michelle.
So the first thing I would like to say is that I am very sorry for taking you guys by surprise. That was not at all my intent to be not communicative or not transparent or any of that. What I thought I was doing was responding to the portion of the RFP that said that whoever you hired needed to be up to speed on matters quickly and get there and have it in hand. So that was the reason that I did the research, which was done even before the contract was signed. So that was our marketing, not your work. The presentation was put together to relay the results of what I thought was information that the township had long had. So my intent was not to startle, surprise, or frighten anybody, and I'm very sorry that I was not familiar enough with the protocol here to have done that more smoothly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? Ms. Chick.
I had received comment recently from residents about the Planning Commission not responding to questions that they bring to the commission at the meeting, so that it gets some kind of answer. And what the board has done, and I don't know if we want to do it here, it's a suggestion, is that after the first call to the public, we have adopted a board member comment, so that they can respond to the speakers that come up and answer questions. Then that might actually help Mr. Dignan tonight in addressing an issue that he wanted to speak to.
Okay.
So that there's actually 2 calls to the public and then 2 board member comments. So I don't know if that's something that we want to look at doing.
That sounds like an interesting idea. We could add that to our agenda, if that seems to be appropriate.
I agree with
Mr.
Ms.
Dignan.
Chick. We do it at the school board level. We do we
Okay.
call it board member clarification.
Okay.
So if there's anything from the public that needs to be clarified, we don't necessarily directly answer questions, but we do offer clarification points on things that are important to the public.
Okay. That's a good idea.
Because sometimes you want to respond, but by the time you get to the end of the meeting, you've lost that train of thought, so.
Or they've left. Yes. Okay. Well, our intent is not to cut anybody off out there. Mr. Kuzno, go ahead.
So if that were the case, if a response is given, is it the official response of the commission that's giving back to the resident, or is it just someone's opinion from this board answering back to the resident?
Usually it's someone's opinion at the board level.
So it's
yeah.
not an official response back
Right.
to a question and/or a comment. It's just someone's chance to clarify, like
Right.
you said.
And then they don't want to turn it into a back and forth either. It's just
Right.
you comment on it, so.
So, and as an example, in item 8-7 of our bylaws is the order of business for regular and special meetings. So that would have to be changed to incorporate, again, so that
Okay.
we follow the guidelines that we are saying we are going to follow for ourselves. So if we do something like that, we need to immediately change the bylaws so that, again, we do truly follow our procedural
Right.
code of conduct.
But it's going to take us a while, since we have in our bylaws that we have to actually put it in the newspaper and everything, and, so. it
Again,
will-
that's
we
one of
can't
the
do
other
it
items we
immediately.
discussed,
That's
yeah.
another item which we could not have to put it in the newspaper. So there are some things like that can be adjusted. So anyway, hopefully we'll get a good recommendation here, and I know we will, from Ms. DeMichelle. Any other comments on that whole topic? Okay, call to the public. Does anyone like to? Thank you. Come on up.
My name is Mr. Warburton, or you could call me Craig if you wish, and I still live on Joy Road at number 450. This was the most embarrassing experience I've had in Northfield Township in a long time. It's really apparent that 2 aspects of the bylaws are coming into play, and it seems to revolve around conflict of interest and dismissal. You have bylaws because they're required by law. You have bylaws to protect us from your skullduggery. And there's something going on here. And you'd be an idiot to say that it's not. You shouted down. You were out of order anyway. You're not a participant in the plan. I'm sorry, I have to address this to you. Mr. Fink is not a participant in the Planning Commission, and he shouted down the professional planner, and I don't think she finished her presentation. The only problem with that first presentation about the surveys was that it didn't go your way. You'll notice, I don't know if you watched the tape, but immediately those of us in the audience swung around so we could get a look at her graphics because they were impeccable. It was not complicated stuff. I don't know that a week of preparation would have really helped you understand that she was really saying opinions don't seem to be changing much, and they don't seem to revolve around increased density. The bylaws have some very specific requirements that are there for a reason. And we have 3 great words that you need to look the definitions up if you haven't. Misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. And it all revolves around good government. And it's protecting us. Only 4 or 5 of us show up at these meetings, and I'm sure you're sick as could be of hearing from us and seeing us. And I hope a ton of people watch on TV. I don't think they do. But you're messing with something that's magical. It's where we live. And I constantly, in preparation for these meetings, go back to the master plan and read the preamble. Maybe that's funny to you. Start being the secretary. If it's so important to you, then speak up and do it. I don't quite understand what you guys are up to. I'm going to find out. We'll get to the bottom of this eventually. At the last meeting, there was a little posse waiting for me outside, urgently waiting to correct my language and point out the inconsistencies in some things I said. And I'm sure that same group might wait for me outside tonight. Oddly, the conversation was about 10 years ago. It's not 10 years ago. It's today. It's about Biltmore. It's about you guys trying to mess with the master plan for some kind of a, I don't know, maybe it's a conflict of interest. You know, why would you want to change the master plan with less than 6 votes? That couldn't be a less good government action to take than anything I could imagine. Why don't you do it with 3? Throw it out. Thank you for your time. And in respect to Ms. Dumichel, I think her work was exemplary as it was written and handed out in the packet.
Thank you.
Okay, David Perry, still of 9411 Earhart Road. First of all, a little note I'd like to make on the comparing of documents was brought up with the bylaws. There's a software solution for that. If there's things that are pulled right out of Michigan law that are dropped directly into your bylaws, there's Adobe Acrobat costs $200. Beyond Compare is almost freeware. Put 2 documents side by side, boom, in 0.3 seconds, it's going to point out those differences for you. So you may want to use that as a tool if you're going to review these documents that way. Second, bylaws, I think there was some kind of consensus here. It's about rules and procedures, okay? And that's obviously very important in kind of an environment like this. But I noticed something here, okay? I was very glad that my high school son was not here tonight, because he would have gone home with me and said, Dad, what was going on? I'm kind of appalled. Because he learned in kindergarten, as I did, that we may disagree with each other. And we disagree. There's people in this room we disagree with. On some topics, we agree on others. But we treat each other with respect. And I have an 89-year-old mother that's going deaf. And I challenge anybody in this room to shout me down. Can't do it. But if I shout you down, it doesn't make me right. There are quiet voices in this room. Most of them are female, it's just the way things work. And they're sometimes shouted down by other voices that are louder, that are intimidating, that look like bullying. As a resident here, it bothers me. As a human being, it bothers me. Disagree, please, that's why you're here, to talk things out. But please respect each other. Finally, I would like to welcome Ms. Dumichel to our community. I was not here for her presentation. I saw it online. It made me very happy because I agree with most of the conclusions that she draws. However, that's not really that unusual. I'm a resident here. And she said, I'm here to listen to the voice of the residents. And it just so happens I loved everything she said because you know what? I'm a resident and this is what we said in these 2 surveys. Now, there was a comment made a minute ago about Ms. Chalkley being 1/7 of the board, okay? My math is not too good here, but I'm going to remind the board that you're like 0.01 of this township, okay? You work for the township. You work for the people of this township. You've got a master plan, you've got surveys, you've been appointed by people that we elect and will elect or re-elect next year. And I want you all to please remember you work for the township. She works for the township, you work for the township. And if I disagree with what the township's thinking, okay, well, I don't get what I want. But I believe that the majority of us want to stick with this master plan. If we disagree on that, let's just be civil as we do it, okay? I'd like to be able to shake the hand of everybody in this room as I walk out. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Hello, David Gordon, 5558 Helena Road. I would like to echo the sentiments that were expressed here regarding the behavior toward our planner and towards each other on the board. It was failed to show respect. I was shocked that we had asked our planner to come through with some recommendations, and she wasn't even permitted to finish her presentation. I don't think we're making a very good impression on her. The bylaws I find very interesting. I'll be interested to see what recommendations are made by various people on how to change those, because when I look through them, there's something with reference there to the Robert's rules, and those are very difficult to run a meeting with, unless somebody here is a professional parliamentarian. I think the rule of respect would be one that would be very helpful. I thought the presentation by the Huron River Watershed was great. I think there were a tremendous number of good recommendations that were made there on things that may be even more important than the bylaws of this town, of this committee. I think it would be very helpful if the township board or the planning commission created a land preservation committee in our community like we have in a lot of neighboring communities, because it's obvious from the surveys that have been done in our communities that that's a very important issue for our residents. And preserving natural features and preserving open space and farmland doesn't happen just if you continue to ignore it. Eventually it's all gone. There were other recommendations that I think the Planning Commission should put a little bit higher on their agenda for accomplishing besides the bylaws, but I watched some members that are sitting on this Planning Commission when they were Board of Trustee members, and I saw them go after the supervisor and try to take away all of her powers so that they could grab them for themselves. I hope that same process isn't taking place here with the same members. The chair is the chair. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm
Yes.
a resident, so I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
Howard Fink,
No,
619.
come up to the microphone as well.
Howard Fink, 619 East Shore Drive. Never done this before. I want to apologize to Leah. I did speak over her, and Leah and I are not in conflict. Leah and I are not in conflict. I actually think that, it's her responsibility to go through this stuff, and all I wanted to do tonight was give you a 5-minute overview of some items that I thought were pertinent and one area of conflict of interest, and somehow it got way out of hand, and I apologize for speaking over you. It was rude of me, and that I apologize. I guess in the future, I come to these meetings to try to help you guys, and tonight I saw some conflict over some things that just were not necessary. I simply tried to make a point that there are some areas in this document that you have that are important for you, and somehow it got out of hand. At the end of the day, I come to the Planning Commission meetings to try to assist the Planning Commission, and because as an individual that's in the office on a day-to-day basis, development
comes through the office as an administrative function. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of value that I can provide to you. It's up to you guys if that is, those are things that you want to avail yourself of, and information that you'd like to have. The other thing is that, you know, as the township manager, I have conversations with the township attorney. We had a conversation about these bylaws and about the sort of legal implications that they have based on his legal analysis that he presented to you tonight. Sorry that the folks in the audience didn't get it. It was emailed. So, you know, these are all things that sort of interact, and that's one of the reasons why I come to the Planning Commission meetings, because there is critical policy and critical issues that will affect our community for 20, 40, 50 years. And so, you know, I'll keep trying, and I'll keep trying to do a better job of communicating better. And so again, with that, that's what I got to say. I'm sorry again.
Thank you, Mr. Fink.
Jim Nelson, 7777 Sutton Road. First, I'd like to apologize to anybody who's watching tonight. We finally lost the main camera. It's been dying for several years, and its autofocus is gone. It's no more. Second, I'd like to invite anybody who's listening to the Northfield Neighbors.today website. We found a 101-page version of the 2010 survey. Until now, we've been limited to a 62-page version. I don't know why this 101-page version was squirreled away where it was on the old township website, but we found it. Anyway, we've got on the front page, we've got all the surveys, 96, the 62-page version of the 2010, 101-page version of the 2010. We've got a links to we've got a link to the YouTube rendition of the presentation of September 16th. We've got copies of the new planner's presentation in a PDF form, so you can, it's perfect. And we've also got extracted by one of our neighbors the list of what was that? The 10 most important things to the residents of the community as determined by the 2010 survey, and the 3 things they disliked most about the current township. Those are extracted in a document form. And if you go to the website, you'll notice that we're going to town on the live minutes. Some of you remember a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, I said something about turning Lisa Lemble's files, which are published in the packet every month, her copies of the minutes into a clickable version that lands you exactly at the point in the meeting where any particular item or element or discussion or comment that's recorded in the minutes occurs. There's, if you're on a fast internet connection, there's no lag. It's one of the things that we're pretty proud of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, comments from the commissioners. Let's start it. Mr. Roman. You go first.
Okay, speaking for myself, I need to apologize also for your report. Your most latest report was very good on the issues. I didn't mean to knock you for using other townships, so that's my apology. You know, I think it's very important that we get all this information at least a week ahead of time. As I said, you know, when I was looking at the bylaws, I didn't look it through the eyes of comparing it to Michigan Planning Enabling Act 33. It's not my favorite read. So I wasn't doing a comparison that way, and I also probably wasn't looking at it like Mr. Fink was. That's why we all have different opinions and different backgrounds, And it's good to be able to review these things before we can discuss them. We knew from last meeting that we were going to talk about this. So I'd like to see, if there is information brought forth at the appropriate time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kuzno.
Yeah, once again, so my apologies to any commissioners or staff that I may have offended by my comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanleycho.
Well, I rarely end up making comments in public about certain things, but I'm going to feel compelled to tonight. I respect individuals coming up and speaking before us in public. They all have opinions. I don't necessarily agree with them. I'm sure some of us don't agree with them either. I do respect people's opinions. Somebody made a comment tonight about how embarrassing our meeting was. Well, I'll tell you what was embarrassing during our meeting is that we have grown adults in our audience that are interrupting our meetings by making comments and shouting out like a child. And I think it's inappropriate. And I understand that they have certain things they would like to say, but I think it's inappropriate. That's an embarrassment to me. We all end up having differences of opinion here. We're not here to sing Kumbaya and hold each other's hands and all get along. I mean, we eventually want to get to an agreement on something. Sometimes it takes some discussions, and sometimes they are, seem argumentative. I think that's a natural progress. I don't dislike anybody on here because they hold differences of opinion on me. I do have a problem with people that come up and make comments towards individual planning commissioners, or they seem to be personal attacks on people, and I do have a problem with that. I think it's uncalled for. I think people should end up acting like adults. I know there's a number of people in the audience that come in on a regular basis, and they're very respectful, and I respect that. But I think some people should end up just looking back at their behavior and maybe readjusting that.
Well, I think as appointed officials, we're called to a higher standard, and I for one will do my best to improve as I relate to my fellow commissioners, and I do my best with the public because I know, I feel for you. I feel for you on either side of the issue, and we're in this business because we want to see the township prosper. We want to see the township do well. We want to take care of our residents. So that's why I'm in it, and so I can get enthusiastic or heated on occasion, but I'll do my best to control myself. And I still appreciate the public coming out, and I would like to exhort the rest of my commissioners to let's try to keep it calm and work together. I appreciate that a lot. Ms. Chick?
Coincidentally, I recently had somebody make a comment to me about respect between the commissioners during a meeting. And I think what would be very helpful if we keep in mind, and it's pretty simple, is that you don't raise your voice. Mm-hmm. You don't blame people or point fingers. You talk about the issues. You don't talk about the person or what they did or did not do, or the commission as a whole, what they did or did not do. So I think if you just, keep a calm voice. I know some of us have big voices and don't mean to be loud, but that's how it comes across. So, but again, from the public too. I mean, sometimes we hear big, grand, sweeping gestures or comments about the position or what the board is doing, and they're just not true. I mean, it sounds great, but to people that might be listening, but be respectful both ways. I mean, in order to get respect, or you have to command respect, you have to be respectful. The other comment I have was the 2010 survey has been online for a long time. You can go to any search engine and just plug in Northfield Township 2010 Community Survey, pulls up the whole thing. So it hasn't been secreted away. It's been out there for a long time.
Thank you. Mr. Iaquinto.
The opening document that was passed out to us in the first call to the public, the most important issues to residents, was an interpretation from that document by one resident, and that was Mr. Gordon. So I want to state that that is an interpretation by that individual and not by any scientific result. Secondly, I felt that the presentation that happened by Mrs. Olsson, as she mentioned multiple times, being a Ann Arbor Township Planning Commission member, was a biased interpretation to us in a dictation of another community's direction that they have gone. There were some good points in her presentation, but I felt with her mentioning that multiple times and the stringent interpretation she's asking us to derive is for an anti-total zero growth policy. Thirdly, the presentation that went on by our planner at the last meeting, again, I stated that I felt it is proper to have presentations to us beforehand, especially on an item such as that. And I felt that Mrs. DiMichele should have gone ahead and looked at our community a little bit more and got the taste of our planning commission a little bit more in the direction before putting forth that presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Dignan.
Thank you. I mean, if there was any offense taken by any planning commissioners, I apologize. It's not the intent. I think since I've been on this board, have had very passionate, very lively debates, discussions. Yeah, at times, you know, people have raised their voices at times, but I think at the end of the day, I don't think I've ever left here angry with a fellow planning commissioner. I even if I adamantly disagree with them, I believe that each one of us is truly doing what we passionately believe is the right thing, as we should. When we are appointed to these positions, we're asked to rise above community sway, to rise above community politics, to rise above those things. And for each of us with our diverse backgrounds and our various experiences, to do what we believe is in the best interest of the township, I believe that we do that. I believe that each of us takes that responsibility very seriously. We sometimes get very vocal groups that want to heavily influence and persuade us. And while I welcome information from anyone that we can digest and look at, you know, our job is to do what we believe is best based on our experiences, our knowledge, and what we believe is in the best interest of the township. Sometimes the community doesn't remember that. We're different than your elected officials who are accountable to you when they go to the polling places. There's a reason we have staggered appointments, so that not one board of trustees has the ability to load the planning commission with a bunch of board members. They're appointed over the course of many years. To do so allows us to be as much as possible a non-political body. That does not mean that our own individual opinions and influences come into play when we are acting in what we believe to be the best interest of the community. With that, I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners for your service. I do want to state that I think it's very important to us that we have the head executive of this township available to us at our meetings. I think it can lend a lot of information that we don't have access to if he's not here. It's important to remember he's accountable for everything that happens in this township to the township board. His job is to be accountable for everything that happens in this township. I think we need to remember that. he does have those conversations that we don't have and can lend that information to us. You know, the suggestion that it's out of order for him to speak, as long as this board sees fit to have him here at our meetings and not tell him differently, if the chair recognizes him, he has every right to speak at this board table, and I personally don't feel that I would want to restrict his ability to do that at the recognition of the chair. You know, that is a very important component. He is the head executive of this community, and we need to remember that. So with that, as Mr. Stanalicho normally says, please keep all of our men and women in service in your prayers, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next regular meeting will be October 21st. I have no idea what will be on the agenda, and so it may be canceled. Just stay tuned. And the one after that will be November 4th. And I'm actually hoping to go to that waterfront communities session in Grosse Pointe. I don't know. So anyway, we'll see about that. Anyway.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Awesome. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye.